Have you ever felt like someone was watching you, following you home when you thought you were safe? At 4 a.m., after a long overnight shift, I stopped at a gas station, just like any other night. But this time it wasn't just me. What happened next was the most terrifying experience of my life. Let me tell you how I came face to face with a stranger who wasn't ready to let me go. After my most recent breakup, I found myself moving back in with my family, a situation I never thought I'd be in. My ex and I had been living together in Boston, in an apartment we'd only recently leased. Here's a tip: never sign a lease with someone you just started dating. Turns out he wasn't who I thought he was. Now, I'm back in Western Massachusetts with my parents. If you've ever been to this state, you'll know the further west you go, the more rural it gets. I've always been more of a city person, late-night diners, bustling streets and all. Living out here feels like being dropped into a slow-motion film. Boring doesn't even begin to cover it. I'm determined to make this temporary, though, until I can save up enough to move out again. This time, avoiding Boston altogether. Too many bad memories. To keep myself afloat, I took back my old job at the local urgent care. The staff welcomed me like I'd never left, which was comforting. But the downside? I've been stuck with overnight shifts. They're quiet and easy, sure, but they mess up everything else. My sleep, my energy, my social life. Not that there's much of one here. After my shift ends, it's usually just me, the road, and the handful of places open at ridiculous hours. This morning I finished at 4 a.m. and decided to swing by a bagel shop that had just opened for the day. They serve more than just bagels, so I grabbed a chicken sandwich and a salad to eat once I got home. But I also needed gas, so I made a stop at the Shell station down the road. This station always feels eerie. The parking lot is huge, but it's almost always empty. Even during the day, it has this weird, desolate vibe. I paid for gas inside to save a little cash, then headed back to my car. As I started fueling, I noticed a blue sedan had pulled up at another pump. A man got out. He wasn't doing anything unusual at first, just fueling his car like I was. But then he locked the pump handle and wandered toward me. "Want to see a funny trick?" he asked, stopping too close for comfort. Everything about this interaction screamed bad idea, but somehow I still found myself replying, "What's the trick?" He held up his hands and started doing that stupid pull-your-finger-off gag, where you just fold one finger down and pretend it's detached. He kept glancing between his hands and my face, smirking like he thought this was the height of comedy, or maybe like he knew how ridiculous he was being. I forced a laugh, hoping he'd take the hint and leave. But he didn't. He kept at it, repeating the trick as if I'd find it funnier the second or third time. I turned away, focusing on the gas pump and pretending he wasn't there. Even then, I could feel his eyes on me, waiting for something. The man scrambled out from under the table, his face twisted into an eerie mix of panic and something I couldn't quite place. My dad charged toward him, wielding the nearest weapon he could find, a heavy candlestick from the dining room sideboard. "Who the hell are you?" my dad bellowed, his voice echoing through the house. The man stood there frozen for a second, his hands half raised, as if he couldn't decide whether to fight back or surrender. Then, in a move so sudden it made my heart lurch, he bolted toward the front door. My dad lunged after him, nearly knocking over a chair, but the man was quicker. He fumbled with the lock for a split second too long, giving my dad enough time to grab his arm. "Call 911!" my dad shouted over his shoulder, his voice strained as he struggled to keep hold of the man who was now thrashing wildly. My mom grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the kitchen, where the landline was. My hands were trembling so much I could barely dial. I managed to connect the call and stammered out our address, telling the dispatcher everything I could between shaky breaths. In the dining room, the sounds of the struggle grew louder. Glass shattered. I had no idea what had broken, and my dad grunted in pain. I rushed back to the doorway, phone still in hand, just in time to see the man break free and dart into the living room. "Block the back door!" my dad shouted, his face red and determined. My mom and I rushed to the kitchen door leading to the backyard, slamming it shut and locking it. We pressed ourselves against it, as if our combined weight could keep him from escaping that way. But the man didn't come toward us. Instead, we heard the distinct sound of a window being shoved open in the living room. My dad swore loudly and ran toward the noise. By the time I followed, the man was halfway out the window, his legs dangling wildly as he tried to haul himself through. My dad grabbed his ankle and yanked him back inside with a force I didn't know he had. The man hit the floor hard, gasping. For a moment he looked completely disoriented, but then he scrambled to his feet, desperate to find another way out. "Stay down!" my dad barked, swinging the candlestick again. This time, he connected, and the man stumbled backward, collapsing against the couch. The distant sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder by the second. Relief washed over me like a wave, but the sight of the intruder still made my skin crawl. He wasn't just some random guy, he had followed me home. The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers burst through the front door, guns drawn. My dad stepped back, breathing heavily, as they ordered the man to lie face down on the floor. He complied, muttering something under his breath that none of us could make out. As the officers cuffed him and hauled him to his feet, one of them turned to us. "Is everyone okay?" We nodded, though my mom and I were both shaking, and my dad was holding his side like he'd pulled a muscle. "Do you know this man?" the other officer asked. "No," I said quickly, then hesitated. "Well, not exactly. I saw him earlier tonight at the gas station." The officer's brows furrowed. "Did he follow you home?" "I think so," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't say a word as they escorted him out, but the look he gave me as he passed sent a chill down my spine. It was almost as if he were daring me to feel safe now that he was gone. After they left, the house felt unbearably quiet. My mom and I sat at the kitchen table, still too shaken to even think about sleep. My dad poured himself a stiff drink, his hands trembling slightly. That night I learned 2 things. 1, never assume a locked door is enough to keep danger out. And 2, always check your surroundings, especially at 4 a.m. in an empty gas station parking lot. The man came out from under the table and began fending off my dad, who is at least 20 years his senior. And as my mom and I saw him overpowering my dad, we began doing whatever we could as well, hitting and punching at the man as my dad still held on to him. It was when all 3 of us were attacking him that he finally decided to retreat and fled through the front door. This was when we called the cops and thanked God for a quick response time. However, that man still had the key to the front door. That night, the police left a police car parked in our driveway to deter that man from coming back. My dad wedged a chair in front of the front door as well and slept in the living room. The next day, he switched out the lock to the front door, and with that, my parents' days of hiding a key outside were over. I do feel guilty for bringing that dangerous man to my parents' house, and it was definitely on me for being careless. But honestly, I think that man followed me with his headlights off because I didn't see any cars behind me the entire ride home. I'm happy for my and my family's safety, though. However, this just made me want to move out of here even more. I like driving at night because there's nothing more that I hate than driving in traffic. I'm from New York, Long Island specifically, and the traffic here is truly unbearable. My brother lives in Florida, and I like to go down and visit pretty often. It's a long drive, though. Depending on when you leave, it could be upwards of 18 hours. I like to leave New York very early in the morning, like 2 a.m., so that I could be out of all the high-traffic areas by the time any cars are on the road. So it was a Thursday morning at 2 a.m. that I was leaving home to get on the road. I stopped for my morning coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, knowing I had a long, grueling drive ahead of me. The reason I was driving and not flying was because I was going to be down there for a whole month, and I didn't want to rely on my brother to take me everywhere I needed to go. By the time I was off of Long Island, it was after 3 a.m. It was smooth sailing from Jersey. The drive from New York to Florida is very easy once you're out of New York. You take the I-95 all the way down. At about 4 a.m., the hunger was starting to set in, and so I pulled off the I-95 at the first sight of a food sign. I saw Wendy's on the sign, and so I figured I'd get breakfast from there. I skipped breakfast at the house because waking up so early, I feel like your brain doesn't have a chance to realize how hungry you are for a few hours. At least that's me, personally. I followed the signs to the Wendy's. I was in some random spot in Jersey. There were no street lights here. I felt like I was in the middle of nowhere. Just about the only light was from my headlights. When I got to the Wendy's parking lot, some of the lights were on and I saw a car in the parking lot, so I pulled into the drive-thru. The menu in the drive-thru was lit up, so I thought it was open. But I sat there for over a minute looking at the intercom, waiting for someone to greet me. But they didn't. I even said, "Excuse me," to no avail. I pulled out my phone and looked up this Wendy's, and wouldn't you know it, it didn't open until 6 a.m. And then suddenly 3 knocks at my window almost sent me out of my seat. I turned to my right and there was a man outside my window smiling. He motioned for me to lower the window. I didn't really feel comfortable doing that, so I just cracked it open just enough to hear him. He said, "The place isn't open." And I said, "Yeah, I actually just found that out." He then told me that he was stranded. He pointed to the one other car in the parking lot over there and said his battery died. He practically begged me to come help him jumpstart his car. I told him I don't have jumper cables, and he told me not to worry, he has them in his trunk. I took one more look at his car parked in the corner spot by the woods, and I said, okay. I believe in karma, and I knew I'd have bad karma if I left this man stranded in a situation that I could have easily helped him out in. He backed away from the car so I could pull my car next to his. Since he was parked head-in, I did the same to align our hoods as close as possible. I got out from my car after popping my hood. He went to go pop his hood and grab his jumper cables. After we connected the cables to the respective terminals, I started my car again. We gave it a minute before I told him he should go try starting his car. He took his sweet time walking inside, but when he tried starting it, the car didn't start. So we gave it another couple of minutes, and then he tried it again. Still nothing. This was weird considering he had just been driving the car, so his battery shouldn't need that long to get enough of a charge to start again. The guy then asked me to hang on as he walked away and got on his phone. He started speaking in Spanish in a pretty low volume. I can't really understand Spanish, so I wasn't even bothering trying to hear what he was saying. He came back to me after his call and said that his friend said to give it a few more minutes and try one more time. I said okay. I was trying to do the right thing, but I was also hoping this wasn't going to eat up much more of my time. But the last thing I was expecting was hearing the aggressive sound of 2 pickup trucks' engines flooring it into the parking lot, one from either side of the building. I instantly put it together. I said, "Oh!" under my breath as I removed the jumper cables from my battery and shut the hood in a hurry. But it was too late. The 2 trucks pulled up behind my car, trapping me in. I had to think on my feet. I looked at the man who was still smiling at me, but now the smile looked and felt much more nefarious and evil. The look he gave me was so unsettling, and it's engraved into my memory. I locked my car with my key fob and darted into the woods. I ran in the dark, cutting up my shins and God knows what. I tripped over something on the ground, and at that point, I took that as the time to lay down and make myself as tiny as possible. I heard a few men yelling in Spanish somewhere in the woods. I was so scared for my life as the voices got closer. I don't think it gets any more tense than what I was experiencing in that moment. I didn't know how many there were. I didn't know if they were armed. But I heard at least 3 voices, and then the voices started fading away back into the distance, and I felt a sense of relief until the sound of my car alarm going off in the distance. All of my stuff was packed in the back of my car. Hundreds of dollars worth of clothes, shoes, watches, bracelets. I started making my way back to the parking lot, crouching down. By the time I got close enough to look into the lot, I could see it was just my car there. All 3 other vehicles were gone. I ran out to my car, and it was anyone's worst nightmare. My rear window was shattered, and all of my stuff was gone. Basically 80% of my entire wardrobe, just stolen. My suitcase in the trunk and all the bags in the back seats. Everything. I actually started to shed tears out of pure stress. I called the police and explained everything. The officers on scene told me they would have to get the CCTV footage from the Wendy's when they opened. After taking all of my info, I was told I didn't need to stay in town and they would be in touch. I was about 2 hours from home. I turned around and drove home. It was the most stressful, depressing, and defeated drive of my life. To make matters worse, I was contacted by the police department in Jersey, and they told me the vehicle in the Wendy's lot had a fake license plate, and the 2 pickup trucks didn't have plates. He told me they were still going to do what they can, but I knew that was just him trying to give me a sense of hope. My stuff was never found. Those bastards got away with it. Like I said, I believe in karma, and I hope those pieces of filth got what was coming to them. We've all taken a long car trip, haven't we? We've all passed that rest area sign multiple times, wondering if we could make it another 20 minutes or not, before having to take a pee break or stretch. Sometimes you're lucky and get one of those huge rest areas with the big buildings with food and everything, but most other times, depending on where you are, you'll be lucky to get a little one with a tiny building just for restrooms and nothing else. Well, I was on a long road trip, a 15-hour road trip actually, and a big chunk of that drive was overnight. I won't say from where to where because I don't really think that matters much, but I will say that I was in some bum area on the east coast of the US. It was late at night and I was powering through the drive. Not many cars on the road at this hour. In fact, it was a pretty rare scene to see another car on the road this late. I was reaching that uncomfortable point in the ride where I had to use the bathroom, and I was just getting overall antsy in my seat from sitting for so long. I started keeping an eye out for a rest area sign, and when I saw that familiar blue sign, it felt like a saving grace. So a few miles later, I veered off into the rest area. It was a small one, but there was a restroom building, and that's all I needed. There were no trucks parked here. I'm pretty sure they could only stay overnight at designated truck rest areas. But there was another car in the parking lot. I considered the possibility that whoever it was asleep in their car. As I got out from my car, I stretched a bit, and on my way to the bathroom, I looked at the other car in the lot, but the windows appeared to be tinted, so I couldn't see if someone was inside of it or not. Not that it was a big deal in the moment, I was just curious. I got inside the bathroom, and I was faced with a strange sight. There was a man standing in the corner of the bathroom with his head looking down and his back towards me. At first, I thought he was using the urinal, but I quickly realized he wasn't even facing the closest urinal. He was literally just facing the corner of the wall. I paused, and I didn't know whether to say something or not. I almost said, "Are you all right?" But the scene was just too weird. I had to walk closer to him, though, to get to the stall, and honestly, I was almost scared to get near him. I just tried to mind my business and keep a normal pace. I walked into the stall and closed the door. Honestly, though, I couldn't go to the bathroom with someone else in the room. I'm one of those people. It was just too dead silent in there. It was weird. I stood in the stall for like a minute trying to at least pee, but I couldn't for some reason. I flushed the toilet anyway and left the stall. But now the man had turned around. He was still standing in the same spot, but now he was facing me. I could see his face, and he was looking at me. I'm not one to ever judge someone's appearance, but this man was the scariest looking man I'd ever seen. There was something so unsettling about his face, specifically his eye region. The expression he had was a blank stare. I hadn't had a social interaction in over 10 hours, and this caught me way off guard. Instead of saying anything, I quickly turned and headed out of the bathroom. I got to my car and wasted no time turning it on and backing it up. As I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw that man walking in the direction of my car. I drove fast away to get him out of my sight. I was relieved to get back on the highway. However, that was the only relief I got. I still had to use the bathroom. I was sure it would only be another 20 minutes or so till the next one. I could hold it. I was right. It was about 20 minutes before I got to the next rest area. It was another nearly identical one as the other. Like I said earlier, most are pretty similar. No cars were in this one, thank God. I pulled into a spot right in front of the bathroom and hurried to the stall, and let's just say I felt a lot better very quickly. As I was finishing up in the stall, I heard footsteps enter the room. They'd stop at one of the urinals, but the footsteps came straight to the stall and stopped. I saw someone's shoes through the bottom crack of the door. They were literally standing on the other side of the stall. My first thought was that it was that guy from the other bathroom. He followed me. My social anxiety was handicapping me from saying anything initially, until I finally mustered up the courage to say, "Someone's in here." No response to this, though. Now I knew I was in trouble. The only thing I could do was dial 911, put it on speaker so that the man could hear the operator say, "911, what's your emergency?" I said loud and clear, "I'm being followed by a dangerous man. I feel threatened." As the operator asked my location and details, I answered everything in a loud voice, in a tone suggesting that I was implying a "you" to the man. Thank God this worked, as the person turned and walked out of the bathroom. I told this to the operator, but said I still would feel safer waiting in here until police came. And that's what I did. A knock at the bathroom door from a police officer was my cue to safely come out. I described the man in the vehicle I saw at the other rest area, the creepy encounter, and then the second creepy encounter at this one. We checked my car as well to make sure it wasn't messed with at all. After determining that he was gone, the officer and I left the rest area at the same time, and eventually he turned off the highway. The rest of my road trip went normal. But damn, was this a terrifying night? I'd never been followed before. I know with almost 100% certainty that the person outside of the stall was the same creep that was in the first bathroom. It just feels extra weird because I'm a male. These things, I feel like, usually seem to happen to women, but I guess it can really happen to anyone.